She couldn't close her legs, not from shame, not from invitation, from exhaustion, from carrying a child alone while running from men who wanted her dead. The Apache widow stood in the ashes of her burned camp, 2 children clinging to her skirt, and asked the one question that would change everything. "You want a wife, Caleb Stone, or do you just want shelter?" He'd turned down 13 women in 5 years, but this one was different. This is the story of how a broken soldier and a hunted widow became each other's salvation. Caleb Stone had turned down 13 women in 5 years. 13 times someone came to his ranch with a pie with a smile, with hope that he might finally forget. Forget the body of his wife lying in a pool of blood beside their 8-year-old daughter, the child's hand still clutching a cloth doll. Caleb couldn't forget, so he lived alone. Until that evening when black smoke rose from the east. The smoke didn't look like campfire smoke. It was black as coal, as sin, as the thing Caleb had been trying to outrun for 7 years. He rode toward it, and what he found there shook something loose in his soul that he thought had died long ago. A small Apache camp. 12 people, all dead. In the middle of the ash and ruin, a white woman knelt in the dirt, arms wrapped around 2 children. She wasn't crying, just sitting there staring at the fresh graves. Caleb dismounted, his boots crunched on the scorched earth. The smell of death and burnt wood filled his lungs. "You need help!" His voice came out rougher than he intended. She looked up. Her eyes were blue empty as a winter sky, like someone who'd died but whose body hadn't figured it out yet. "I need a shovel." He handed her one from his saddlebag. They buried the dead in silence. 12 graves. Among them was her husband, an Apache warrior named Gray Wolf. She worked with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate, detached, like her mind had gone somewhere else and left her body to finish the work. When the sun set behind the hills, Caleb looked at the 2 children. The girl, maybe 8 years old, had blonde hair and blue eyes. The resemblance to Molly hit him like a fist to the chest. The boy was younger, 6 perhaps, shivering with fever despite the desert heat. "Come with me," Caleb said. "You stay here, you'll be dead by morning." The woman Anna looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. They rode in darkness for 3 hours. The journey to his ranch stretched long and silent, broken only by the rhythm of hooves on hard earth and the occasional cough from the boy. Grace, the daughter, kept drifting toward sleep in the saddle, her small body swaying dangerously. "Easy there." Caleb reached out just as the child started to slip. He caught her, pulled her onto his horse in front of him. She weighed almost nothing. Her head lolled against his chest, blonde hair sticky with sweat and ash. It had been 7 years since he'd held a child. His hand trembled as he adjusted his grip. In his coat pocket he could feel the outline of Molly's cloth doll, the one he'd carried every day since he buried her. The fabric had worn thin from his fingers, tracing its shape, trying to remember the sound of his daughter's laugh. Grace mumbled something in her sleep. Not words, just the soft whimper of a child too tired to be afraid anymore. Behind him, Anna rode with Ben wrapped in a blanket, the boy's fevered breathing loud in the night air. Caleb glanced back once. Even in the moonlight he could see the exhaustion carved into Anna's face, the way she held herself rigid in the saddle, like if she relaxed even a fraction, she'd collapse entirely. "The boy sick long?" Caleb asked. Anna's response came after a pause, as if she had to drag the words up from somewhere deep. "Fever started a week ago. No medicine. There's a doctor in town." Another pause, longer this time. "Doctors don't see people like me. People like you. People who lived with Apaches." Caleb said nothing. What could he say? She was right. Copper Ridge wasn't a forgiving town. It was a place where people drew lines and punished anyone who crossed them. Thomas Blackwood had crossed that line. They'd strung him up for it. The ranch appeared ahead, a dark shape against darker hills. Caleb's pulse kicked up a notch. Something felt wrong. He couldn't place it, just an instinct honed by too many years of watching for danger. He guided his horse toward the small cabin behind the main house, the one he used for storage. The door stood slightly ajar. He'd locked it that morning. He was certain of it. Caleb dismounted, handed Grace's sleeping form to Anna, and pulled his rifle from its sheath. "Stay here." He pushed the cabin door open with the barrel of his gun. Moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating fresh boot prints in the dust. Someone had been here, recently. A piece of paper lay on the old table. Caleb picked it up, angled it toward the light. "Heard you picked up strays. Town don't like it." The handwriting was familiar. William Pike, a rancher who owned half the land around Copper Ridge and thought he owned the other half too. The kind of man who used fear the way other men used money. Caleb crumpled the note in his fist. So Pike already knew. That meant the whole town would know by morning. Maybe sooner. He stepped back outside. Anna still sat on her horse, Ben limp in her arms. Grace now awake and clinging to her mother's waist. In the pale light, Caleb could see what he'd missed before. Anna's dress hung loose, but not loose enough to hide the swell of her belly. 4 months, maybe a bit more. She caught him staring, lifted her chin with something that might have been defiance if she'd had the strength for it. "You have something to say?" "No." "Most people do." Caleb holstered his rifle. "I'm not most people." He showed them inside the cabin, lit the oil lamp, and watched Anna lower Ben onto the narrow bed. The boy's skin looked gray in the lamplight, his breathing shallow and rapid. Grace hovered nearby, her small hands twisted together, trying so hard to be brave. "Stay here tonight," Caleb said. "I'll ride into town at first light, get the doctor." Anna looked up from her son. "He won't come." "He will." "You don't understand. My first husband, Thomas Blackwood, they lynched him. Right in the middle of town, for marrying me, for taking in Apache children that weren't his blood. They called him a traitor. Called me worse." Her voice stayed flat factual, like she was reciting a story that had happened to someone else. But her hands shook as she smoothed Ben's hair back from his fevered forehead. "After Thomas died, I ran. Took the children into the mountains. Gray Wolf found us half dead from exposure. He could have left us. Should have. But he didn't. He brought us to his camp and his people. They took us in. Gray Wolf married me. Not because he loved me. Because it was right." She paused, looked down at her swollen belly. "This baby is Gray Wolf's. I'll give birth in January, if I'm still alive." "You'll be alive," Caleb said. The certainty in his own voice surprised him. "In my house you'll be alive." Anna's laugh was bitter, brittle. "You don't know that. You don't know what's coming." "What's coming?" She met his eyes then, and for the first time he saw past the exhaustion to the fear underneath. "The men who killed Gray Wolf and his people. They're still out there. And they know I survived." Caleb absorbed this information slowly. The attack on the Apache camp hadn't been random violence. It had been deliberate, targeted. Someone had wanted Anna dead and didn't care how many others died in the process. "Why?" he asked. "Why come after you?" Anna looked away. "Because I exist. Because I married an Apache. Because I carry his child. Because I'm proof that the lines they draw aren't real, and that terrifies them." Grace whimpered in her sleep. Ben coughed a wet, rattling sound that made Anna flinch. The cabin felt too small, suddenly the walls pressing in the weight of what Caleb had just taken on, settling heavy on his shoulders. He should tell her to leave, should give her supplies and directions to the nearest town where people might be less cruel, should protect himself and his land and his carefully maintained solitude. But when he looked at Grace curled on the floor beside her brother's bed, blonde hair spreading across the rough wood, he saw Molly, saw his daughter's last moments, the way she'd tried to crawl to her mother still holding that damn doll. "Get some rest," he said finally. "We'll figure it out in the morning." He turned to leave, but Anna's voice stopped him at the door. "Why are you doing this?" Caleb didn't turn around, didn't trust himself to look at her, at the children, at the ghost of everything he'd lost. "Because someone should have helped my family, and no one did." He walked back to the main house, each step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, he poured himself whiskey. He wouldn't drink, sat at the table in the dark, and pulled Molly's doll from his pocket. The cloth was soft, worn, nearly threadbare in places from 7 years of him carrying it like a penance. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, her last words to him before he'd ridden out that morning. "Be safe. Come back to us." He'd promised he would, but he'd been 3 days late. 3 days that meant everything. The Apache raiders who killed them had probably been looking for horses' supplies, anything they could take. Maybe they hadn't even meant to kill Sarah and Molly. Maybe they'd just panicked when Sarah grabbed a rifle. Maybe. It didn't matter. Dead was dead, and Caleb had learned to his regret that dead doesn't care about maybes. He'd joined the army after that, fought in the Apache Wars with a fury that scared even hardened soldiers. He'd killed 11 Apache warriors in hand-to-hand combat, each one a futile attempt to balance the scales to make the rage inside him mean something. It never did. Eventually, he'd mustered out, bought this ranch with money that felt like blood money, and tried to forget, tried to live. But living meant feeling, and feeling meant remembering. So mostly he just existed. Day after day of the same routine, the same empty rooms, the same ghost-filled silence. Until tonight. Caleb set the doll on the table, looked at it in the darkness. "I don't know what I'm doing, Molly girl, but I can't let them die. Not when I can do something this time." The doll, as always, had no answer. He didn't sleep that night. Just sat at the window, rifle across his lap, watching the cabin, watching for any sign of movement beyond it, any shadow that didn't belong. Pike's note had been a warning. The next visit wouldn't be a note. Dawn broke cold and gray. Caleb saddled his horse, made sure his revolver was loaded, and rode toward Copper Ridge. The town hadn't changed in 7 years, wouldn't change in 70. Same dusty main street, same weathered storefronts, same saloon where men went to forget their failures and wives. The general store stood at the north end, Harrison's medical office beside it. Sheriff Ward's office occupied the corner, an American flag hanging limp in the still morning air. People were already out going about their business. They stared at Caleb as he rode past. Not the usual polite nods or casual greetings. These were different looks. Knowing, judging. Word had spread fast, faster than he'd expected. He tied his horse outside the medical office and knocked. Doc Harrison answered, a thin man in his 60s with steady hands and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Caleb, heard you might be coming by. Town gossips faster than wildfire. Always has." Doc Harrison stepped aside, let Caleb enter. The office smelled of carbolic acid and old leather. Medical instruments gleamed on a tray by the window. "What do you need?" "Got a sick boy at my place. 6 years old. High fever, weak breathing. Been sick about a week with no treatment." Harrison was already reaching for his bag. "I'll come. There's more you should know." The doctor paused. "Go on." "The boy's mother is Anna Blackwood, Thomas Blackwood's widow. She's been living with an Apache camp. That camp was attacked last night. She survived. Her Apache husband didn't." Harrison's expression didn't change. He finished packing his bag, pulled on his coat. "And you took them in?" "I did." "You know what that means. What people will say, what they might do." Caleb met his eyes. "I know." "Then you're braver or more foolish than most. I haven't decided which." Harrison picked up his bag, gestured toward the door. "Let's go see about that boy." They stepped outside together. The street had filled while they talked. 20, maybe 30 people stood in small clusters, pretending not to watch, but watching all the same. Caleb recognized most of them. Shopkeepers, ranch hands, the women who'd brought him pies and casseroles over the years, trying to coax him back to the living. Margaret Hayes stood at the front, hands clasped in front of her expensive dress, her face a careful mask of concern that didn't quite hide the hurt underneath. She stepped forward as Caleb reached his horse. "Caleb Stone, a word." "Not now, Margaret." "Yes, now." She moved closer, pitched her voice so only he could hear. 5 years I've waited. 5 years you turned down every woman in this town, every offer of companionship, every attempt at friendship. You said you weren't ready, said you never would be, and I respected that. We all did. Her voice shook slightly. Then last night an Apache woman shows up and suddenly you're taking people in, suddenly you care. She needed help. We all needed help, Caleb, all of us who lost people, all of us who mourned. But you shut us out. You shut me out. And for what? For this. Caleb looked at Margaret Hayes properly for the first time in years. She'd been Sarah's closest friend, had stood at the funeral with tears streaming down her face, had brought food every week for months after trying to keep him fed, trying to keep him sane. She'd wanted to marry him. He'd known that. Everyone had known that. She'd never said it outright, but the offer had been there in every visit, every concerned glance, every gentle suggestion that maybe it was time to move forward. He'd said no. To her. To everyone. Because moving forward meant leaving Sarah and Molly behind, and he couldn't do that. Wouldn't. But now, somehow, he'd said yes to Anna. Not to marriage, not to anything like that. Just to help. Just to basic human decency. And Margaret could see the difference, could see that he'd opened a door for Anna that he'd kept bolted shut for everyone else. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "But I can't explain it. Not in a way that would make sense." "Try?" "She has children, an 8-year-old girl who looks like Molly, a 6-year-old boy who might die without help, and she's pregnant. She's lost 2 husbands. She's alone. If I turn her away, I'm no better than the men who killed my family." Margaret's expression hardened. "You know what this will do. Taking in Thomas Blackwood's woman. The town hasn't forgotten what he did. How he defied everyone to marry her. They strung him up for it, Caleb. They'll do worse to you." "Let them try." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You really think you can protect her? You're one man. William Pike has 40 ranch hands. Sheriff Ward won't stand against him. The town won't either. You're choosing a losing battle." "Then I lose." Margaret stepped back, shook her head slowly. "You're a fool, Caleb Stone. A noble fool, maybe, but still a fool." She turned and walked away, her back straight, head high. The other townspeople parted for her, then closed ranks again, murmuring among themselves. Caleb swung into his saddle. Doc Harrison did the same. They rode out of town in silence, the weight of hostile stares following them until they cleared the last building. "You've made enemies today," Harrison said. "I made enemies 7 years ago when I survived, and my family didn't. This just made it official." They rode hard, reached the ranch within the hour. Caleb led Harrison to the cabin, knocked softly before entering. Anna sat beside Ben's bed, her hand on the boy's forehead. Grace stood at the window, her small face pressed against the glass, watching. "I brought the doctor," Caleb said. Anna turned surprise and relief warring in her exhausted features. "You came." "Said I would." Harrison moved past Caleb, set his bag down, began examining Ben with practiced efficiency. "How long has he been like this?" 8 days. Maybe 9. Harrison checked the boy's pulse, listened to his breathing, looked in his throat. His face remained professionally neutral, but Caleb saw the concern in the set of his shoulders. "It's pneumonia," Harrison said finally. "Advanced. Should have been treated days ago." Anna's voice came out small, defeated. "No one would see us." "I'm seeing you now." Harrison pulled bottles from his bag, began mixing a tonic. "He needs rest fluids and this medicine 3 times a day. The fever should break within 48 hours, if it doesn't send for me immediately." He showed Anna how to administer the medicine, how to watch for signs of improvement or decline. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching Grace watch the doctor work. The girl hadn't moved from the window, hadn't made a sound. "Grace," Anna called softly. "Come here, sweetheart. The doctor's going to make Ben better." Grace turned, and Caleb saw the tears on her face. Silent tears, the kind that spoke of too much loss, too much fear for someone so young to carry. She walked to her mother, but her eyes stayed on Caleb. "Are you going to leave us?" The question hit harder than it should have. "What?" "Are you going to go away, like Pa did, like my other Pa did?" Anna reached for her daughter. "Grace, that's not. Everyone leaves." Grace said, her voice matter-of-fact, resigned, like she'd already accepted it as truth. "Everyone always leaves." Caleb knelt down, bringing himself to the girl's eye level. Up close, the resemblance to Molly was even stronger. Same blue eyes, same stubborn set to her jaw, same way of holding hurt inside and trying not to show it. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I live here. This is my ranch. You're staying here, so I'll be here too. Promise." He should have hedged, should have given himself room to maneuver. Instead, he said, "I promise." Grace threw her arms around his neck so suddenly he almost fell backward. She buried her face in his shoulder, and her small body shook with sobs she'd been holding in for God knows how long. Caleb's arms moved automatically, wrapping around her, holding her the way he'd held Molly 1,000 times, the way he'd never thought he'd hold a child again. His throat closed up, eyes burning. Over Grace's shoulder he met Anna's gaze. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Doc Harrison finished with Ben straightened, pulled Caleb aside while Anna comforted her daughter. "The boy will live if he gets proper care, but there's something else you should know." "What?" "Anna's malnourished, dehydrated. I'd say she hasn't had a proper meal in weeks, maybe months. And she's pregnant. 4 months along, maybe closer to 5. I noticed. If she doesn't start eating resting, she could lose the baby, or worse, lose herself. Childbirth is dangerous enough without adding malnutrition and stress to the mix." Caleb nodded slowly, processing this new weight, this new responsibility. "I'll make sure she eats." "That's not all." Harrison lowered his voice further. "There's bruising. Old bruises, mostly healed but severe. Someone beat her badly, multiple times." Rage, hot and sudden, flared in Caleb's chest. "Who?" "She won't say. But given what happened to the Apache camp, I'd guess whoever attacked them didn't just kill the men quickly. They took their time." The image that formed in Caleb's mind made his hands clench into fists. Anna, 4 months pregnant, trying to protect her children, while men with guns and torches destroyed everything around her. Men like Pike. Men who saw Apache sympathizers as less than human, deserving of whatever violence came their way. "One more thing," Harrison said. "This isn't medical, just personal advice. Be careful, Caleb. Pike won't let this go. He's been looking for an excuse to move against Anna Blackwood ever since Thomas died. You've just given him one. What's his interest in her?" Harrison's expression turned grim. "Pike wanted to marry Anna himself years ago, before Thomas. She turned him down. Some men don't forget rejection." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Pike hadn't just hated Thomas for crossing racial boundaries. He'd hated him for taking what Pike thought belonged to him. And when Thomas died, Pike had expected Anna to be humbled, broken, available. Instead, she'd run, found refuge with Apaches, married one of them, carried his child. Every choice an insult to Pike's pride, every act of survival a rejection of his claim. "He ordered the attack on the camp," Caleb said, not a question. "Can't prove it, but I'd stake my reputation on it." They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding what this meant. Pike wouldn't stop, couldn't stop, not until Anna was dead or gone, and Caleb had just put himself between them. Harrison packed his bag, left instructions and medicine, promised to check on Ben in a few days. He paused at the door, looked back at Caleb. "Your wife and daughter would be proud of you, doing the right thing even when it's hard. Or they'd think I'm a fool for risking what's left of my life. Sarah Stone was the kindest woman I ever knew. She'd want you to help. And Molly, she'd be thrilled to have other children around. You're not betraying them by moving forward." After Harrison left, Caleb stood in the cabin doorway watching Anna tend to Ben Grace, now asleep curled at the foot of the bed. The scene looked almost peaceful, almost normal, like a family which they weren't, couldn't be. But for a moment, just a moment, Caleb let himself imagine what it might be like. To have voices in his house again, to hear children's laughter, to wake up knowing someone needed him for more than just his solitude. The thought terrified him. Anna looked up, caught him watching. "You don't have to do this. Take us in. Put yourself at risk." "I know." "Then why?" He could have said a lot of things. Could have talked about duty, about debt, about paying forward the help no one gave his family. But what came out was simpler, more honest. "Because your daughter looks at me like I'm not already dead, and I forgot what that felt like." Anna's eyes glistened. She turned back to Ben, but not before Caleb saw her hand move instinctively to her swollen belly, protecting what grew there. That night, Caleb made them a proper meal. Venison stew with potatoes and carrots from his small garden. Nothing fancy, but hot and filling. Anna ate like someone who'd forgotten what real hunger felt like until it was satisfied. Grace picked at her food, watching Caleb warily, like she expected him to vanish if she looked away. Ben slept through dinner, but his color looked better, his breathing less labored. After they ate, Caleb showed Anna the cabin's basic amenities. Where the well was how to work the stove, where he kept extra blankets. Mundane details that felt heavy with meaning, like he was giving away parts of his carefully maintained isolation. "I'll sleep in the main house," he said. "You keep the cabin. There's a lock on the door. Use it. You expect trouble. I expect to be ready if it comes." Anna nodded, exhaustion pulling at her features. "Caleb, why did you really bring the doctor? Most people they'd have let Ben die. One less mouth to feed. One less complication." He looked at her standing there in the lamplight, one hand on her belly, the other resting on Grace's shoulder. A widow carrying another man's child, mothering children who'd lost 2 fathers. She should have looked defeated, broken. Instead, she looked like tempered steel, bent but not shattered. "I brought the doctor because I've spent 7 years wishing someone had been there for my family. Seems a waste to keep wishing if I'm not willing to be that someone for yours." He left before she could respond, walked back to the main house under a sky full of stars that gave no answers. Inside, he checked his rifles, counted ammunition, planned fields of fire. Old cavalry habits dying hard. But beneath the tactical thinking, something else stirred. A feeling he'd thought long dead. Purpose. The sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a reason he'd survived when Sarah and Molly hadn't. He pulled out Molly's doll one more time, held it in the darkness. "I think," he said to the empty room, "I think you'd like her. Grace? She's scared and trying to be brave just like you always were. And her mama, she's fighting for her kids the way yours fought for you." The doll offered no judgment, no approval, just the weight of memory and the ghost of possibilities. Caleb set it on the table, went to his room, lay on the bed fully clothed with his revolver under the pillow. Sleep came in fragments broken by every sound outside, every shift in the wind. His body knew even if his conscious mind wanted to deny it. The waiting was almost over. The storm was coming. It arrived at midnight in the form of 5 horses and 5 men. Caleb heard them before he saw them, boots on the porch, voices low and purposeful. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. William Pike stood at the front, 3 ranch hands flanking him, and someone else Caleb didn't recognize. They weren't bothering with stealth. This was a message visit. Caleb stepped onto his porch rifle, held loose but ready. "That's far enough." Pike smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Caleb Stone, heard you've been making new friends." "What do you want, Pike?" "Just checking in. Making sure you understand the situation. That woman in your cabin, she's trouble. Bad for business. Bad for the town. Bad for decent folk. She's a widow with sick children. She's an Apache whore who got what she deserved." Pike's voice stayed casual, conversational, which somehow made it worse. Thomas Blackwood, he thought he could spit in the face of every God-fearing person in Copper Ridge by marrying that woman. We showed him the error of his ways. Then she runs off to the Apaches, spreads her legs for them savages. Some lessons they need teaching twice. Caleb's finger moved to the trigger. "Get off my property, or what you'll shoot. We both know you're outnumbered, and the sheriff, he's not going to come running. Not for you, not for her." One of the ranch hands moved toward the cabin. Caleb swung his rifle, aimed at the man's chest. "Take another step, and it's the last one you take." The man froze. Pike laughed. "You willing to die for her, Stone, for some used-up woman and her half-breed brats? I've been dead 7 years. Dying again doesn't scare me much." The cabin door opened. Anna stood in the doorway, lamp in one hand, rifle in the other. Not Thomas's rifle, Caleb's spare, the one he'd left hanging by the door in case she needed it. She looked at Pike with eyes that held no fear, no pleading, just cold assessment. "William Pike," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "I heard you were still crawling around poisoning everything you touch." Pike's smile vanished. You should have died with your Apache husband. But I didn't. Just like I didn't die when you had Thomas lynched. Just like I won't die tonight. How does that feel, Pike? All that power, all those men, and you still can't kill one pregnant woman. We killed 12 Apaches easy enough. You killed 12 sleeping people in the middle of the night. That's not power, that's cowardice. Pike's hand moved to his gun. Caleb aimed at his head. Don't! The standoff stretched 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Finally, Pike raised his hands, slowly stepped back. This isn't over. Sheriff Ward's already got a warrant coming. Federal Marshal will be here tomorrow morning, day early. I made sure of it. Then we'll see who's protected and who's not. A warrant for what? Caleb demanded. Aiding Apache raiders. Murder. Theft. Take your pick. The marshal won't care which charges stick. Just that they're white man charges against an Indian lover. Anna's face went pale, but she didn't lower the rifle. Let them come. I've got nothing to hide. You've got plenty to hide. And when they take you, those kids are going to orphanages. That baby you're carrying, they'll take it too, soon as it's born. Give it to decent folk who'll raise it proper. Grace appeared behind her mother, small hands clutching Anna's skirt. She'd heard everything. Her face showed too much understanding for an 8-year-old. Pike noticed her smiled that terrible smile again. Pretty little girl. Shame she's got bad blood. But maybe with the right upbringing she could still turn out useful. Caleb fired. Not at Pike, at the ground in front of his horse. The animal reared nearly through its rider. The other horses spooked, dancing sideways. Next bullet goes through flesh, Caleb said, voice dead calm. Leave, now. Pike got his horse under control, glared at Caleb with pure hatred. Tomorrow. By noon tomorrow you've got no legal ground to stand on. Think about that. Think about whether one used-up woman is worth losing everything. They rode out, but slowly taking their time, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not fear. When the hoofbeats faded, Caleb lowered his rifle. His hands didn't shake. Years of cavalry training held them steady, but inside his heart hammered against his ribs. Anna walked across the yard, Grace still clinging to her skirt. In the lamplight, Caleb could see tear tracks on the girl's face, though she made no sound. "What's an orphanage?" Grace asked, her voice small. Anna knelt down with difficulty, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "It's a place where children go when they don't have parents. But you do have a parent. You have me. And Mr. Stone." Both of them looked at Caleb. He should have corrected the assumption, should have explained that he was just providing temporary shelter, that he wasn't their father, wasn't their family. Instead, he heard himself say, "You have me too." Grace launched herself at him again, wrapped her arms around his waist. This time he was ready for it, caught her, held her, while she cried. Not the silent tears from before. Real sobs, the kind that shook her whole body, that came from somewhere deep, where children store their fears. Anna stood slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other still holding the rifle. She looked at Caleb over her daughter's head, and something passed between them. Not love, not even attraction, just understanding. They were in this together now, whether they'd chosen it or not. 2 days, she said. He gave us 2 days. Then we used them. To do what? Run? Where would I go? Mexico's 3 days hard riding. I can't make that pregnant. And the children? I'm not suggesting you run. Then what? Caleb looked at Grace still clinging to him, at Ben sleeping in the cabin behind Anna, at Anna herself with her rifle and her pride and her swollen belly. What he was about to say would change everything, would take his carefully maintained isolation and shatter it completely. But Pike was right about one thing. In 2 days, a federal marshal would arrive with a warrant. Real or fake didn't matter. A marshal could take Anna, split up the children, bury any evidence that might prove her innocent. Once she was in custody, she was as good as dead, unless she wasn't available to arrest. "There's one way," Caleb said slowly, the idea forming even as he spoke it. "One legal protection that trumps a marshal's warrant." Anna's eyes narrowed. "What?" "Marriage. If you're my wife, you're my property under the law. They'd need a court order from a territorial judge to take you. That takes weeks, maybe months. Time to find a lawyer, build a real defense. The word hung between them. Wife. It felt wrong, sacrilegious somehow, like he was betraying Sarah's memory. But it also felt inevitable, like every choice since he'd seen that black smoke rising had been leading here. Anna stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious. You don't even know me. You don't love me. Why would you? Because it's the right thing to do. And because Pike is a bastard who needs stopping. And because Grace asked me if I'd leave and I said I wouldn't, and I don't break promises to children. Grace looked up at him, then at her mother. What's marriage? It's when two people decide to be family, Anna said softly. To take care of each other. Like you and Pa, and you and Grey Wolf. Yes, sweetheart. Like that. Grace looked at Caleb with those two solemn eyes. Would you be my Pa then? The question should have terrified him. Instead, something in his chest loosened like a knot he'd been carrying for 7 years suddenly gave way. If you'd have me. Grace smiled. A real smile, the first he'd seen from her. It lit up her whole face, made her look like the child she should be instead of the survivor she'd been forced to become. But Anna wasn't smiling. She stepped back, shook her head. No, I can't ask you to do that. To tie yourself to me legally, to risk everything you have. It's too much. You're not asking. I'm offering. Why? You don't want a wife. You want shelter. You want to ease your guilt about not saving your own family. That's not enough foundation for a marriage, even a legal one. Her words hit like knives, precise and cutting. Not because they were cruel, but because they were partially true. He was trying to save Anna and her children because he couldn't save Sarah and Molly. That was part of it, but not all of it. You asked me earlier why I brought the doctor, Caleb said. I told you it was about being there for someone when no one was there for mine. That's true, but there's more. What more? He looked at Grace again, at the way she held on to him with perfect trust, perfect faith that he meant what he said. Looked at the cabin where Ben slept fever-breaking because Caleb had gotten him help. Looked at Anna standing there pregnant and proud and refusing to beg. When my family died, something in me died with them. I thought that was it. Thought I'd just walk through the rest of my life like a ghost, putting one foot in front of the other, until eventually my body caught up with my soul. But these past 2 days, having you here, having the children, I felt something I thought was gone forever. What? Purpose. Not just existing. Actually living. Actually mattering to someone. Grace looks at me like I'm not dead yet, and I'd forgotten what that felt like. Anna's expression softened slightly, but doubt still clouded her eyes. That's not enough for marriage, not even a legal one. You're asking yourself to commit to me, to my children, to a baby that's not yours. What happens when the danger passes and you realize you're stuck with us? Then I'm stuck. I've had worse. That's not funny. I'm not joking. They stared at each other across the yard, the lamp casting long shadows. Grace had gone quiet, sensing the weight of what was being discussed. Finally, Anna said, I need to think about it. This isn't a decision to make in the middle of the night with Pike's threats still hanging in the air. Caleb nodded. Fair enough, but don't think too long. We've got less than 48 hours. She took Grace's hand, led her back to the cabin. At the door she paused, looked back. Caleb, if we do this, if I say yes, I need to know something first. What? Do you want a wife? Her voice had changed, taken on an edge he couldn't quite read. Or do you just want shelter for your conscience, for your guilt? Because if it's just shelter you're offering, I'd rather take my chances with the marshal. The question struck him silent. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he didn't know if the answer he had was the one she needed to hear. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know if I can be a husband again. Don't know if I'm capable of that. But I know I don't want you dead. I know I don't want your children torn apart. And I know having you here makes me feel less like a corpse and more like a man. If that's enough, then yes. If it's not, then I understand. Anna stood there for a long moment, silhouetted in the doorway, Grace pressed against her side, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. She looked like a painting, something eternal and ancient. Mother and child, survivor and guardian. "I'll give you my answer in the morning," she said finally, and closed the door. Caleb walked back to his house, reloaded his rifle, and sat at the window until dawn broke over the hills. He didn't sleep, didn't try. Just watched and waited, and wondered what kind of man offers marriage as a legal shield, and what kind of woman might accept it. The answer, he suspected, was two people who'd lost too much to lose anything more. Two people who'd learned that sometimes survival requires compromise, requires taking shelter where you find it even if that shelter comes with complications. Two people who were tired of being ghosts. As the sun rose, painting the sky pink and gold, Caleb made coffee and waited for Anna's decision. Whatever she chose, whatever came next, at least he'd tried. At least he'd stood between her and the men who wanted her dead. Sarah would have approved of that much, at least. And Molly, she'd have loved. Grace would have taken her under her wing, taught her to be strong. The thought brought a smile to his face, the first genuine smile in 7 years. Maybe Harrison was right. Maybe this wasn't betraying his family's memory. Maybe it was honoring it, living the way they would have wanted him to live, with purpose, with compassion, with the courage to care about someone other than ghosts. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Anna stood on the porch, dawn light catching in her blonde hair, Grace beside her. Both looked like they'd slept as little as he had. "I have my answer," Anna said. Caleb waited, heart hammering in a way it hadn't since the day he'd come home to find his family dead. Anna's hand moved to her belly, a protective gesture he'd seen her make 100 times in 2 days. Then she met his eyes, and in them he saw fear and hope and desperate determination. "Ask me properly," she said. "Not as a legal transaction, not as a shield. Ask me like it matters." "It does matter." "Then ask." Caleb stepped off his porch, stood in front of her with nothing between them but morning air and 2 days of impossible choices. He wasn't good with words, never had been, but sometimes the plainest words were the truest. "Anna Blackwood, will you marry me?" She looked at him, really looked at him like she was searching for something beneath the surface. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Yes, but on one condition." "What condition?" "That someday when this is over, when we're safe, you'll answer my question honestly. Not the question about marriage, the other one." "Which one?" "Do you want a wife, Caleb Stone, or do you just want shelter?" He thought about hedging, about giving himself room to maneuver, but her eyes demanded honesty, and maybe he owed her that much. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I promise you this. When I figure it out, you'll be the first to know." She smiled, then a real smile that transformed her tired face into something almost beautiful. "Then I guess we'd better start living like we mean it." The ride to town felt longer than it should have. Caleb led the way on his bay gelding, Anna beside him on the mare, Grace riding double behind her mother, small arms wrapped tight around Anna's waist. Ben stayed at the ranch, still too weak from fever, watched over by Doc Harrison, who'd agreed to stay until they returned. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the desert air thick and heavy. Dust rose from the horses' hooves, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Nobody spoke. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down like a physical thing, making casual conversation impossible. Grace broke the silence first. "Mama, what's a wedding like?" Anna shifted in the saddle, one hand moving to steady her daughter. "It's simple, usually. The Reverend says some words, you say some words back, and then you're married." "Will there be a party?" "I don't think so, sweetheart, not this time." "Why not?" Anna glanced at Caleb, a question in her eyes. He kept his gaze forward, jaw tight. "How did you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother was marrying a stranger to avoid being arrested, that the wedding was a legal maneuver, not a celebration?" "Because," Anna said carefully, "Mr. Stone and I are getting married for grown-up reasons, important reasons. It's not the kind of wedding with cake and dancing. But you'll still be married like you and Pa, and you and Gray Wolf. Yes, we'll still be married. Grace seemed to accept this, settled back against her mother. But Caleb caught the doubt in Anna's voice, the way she said married like she wasn't entirely sure what the word meant anymore. Copper Ridge appeared on the horizon, buildings shimmering in the heat. Even from a distance, Caleb could see people on the streets, more than usual for a weekday morning. Word had spread. The whole town probably knew by now that he'd taken in Anna Blackwood, knew that Pike had paid a visit, knew something was about to happen. They rode down Main Street under the weight of hostile stares. Shopkeepers paused in their doorways. Women clutched their handbags tighter, pulled their children closer. Men leaned against hitching posts, arms crossed, faces hard. Margaret Hayes stood outside the general store watching them pass. Her expression was unreadable, but Caleb saw her hands clenched, white-knuckled around her parasol. The church sat at the east end of town, a simple wooden structure with a cross mounted above the door. Reverend Samuel Cross was in the yard tending to the small garden he kept beside the building. He looked up as they approached, squinted against the sun, then straightened slowly when he recognized them. Cross was 58, gray-haired and lean, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of bearing other people's burdens. He'd officiated at Sarah and Molly's funeral, had spoken words meant to comfort that fell flat because no words could comfort a man who'd lost everything. "Caleb," Cross said, wiping dirt from his hands. "Wasn't expecting to see you today. Need a favor, Reverend?" Cross looked at Anna, at Grace, back to Caleb. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I see. Come inside. We should talk." The church interior was cool in dim sunlight filtering through plain glass windows. Wooden pews lined both sides of a center aisle leading to a simple altar. The air smelled of beeswax and old hymnals. Cross led them to the front, gestured for them to sit. Grace climbed into a pew, swinging her legs, while Anna settled beside her, one hand pressed to her lower back. "You want to get married," Cross said. "Not a question." "Today," Caleb confirmed. "Now, if possible." "Because of the warrant Pike mentioned." "You heard about that?" "Whole town's heard. Pike made sure of it. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that a federal marshal is coming to arrest Anna Blackwood for conspiracy with Apache raiders. Says he has witnesses, evidence, the whole works." Anna's face went pale. "Witnesses to what I never conspired with anyone. I lived with Gray Wolf's people because they offered me shelter when my own people wanted me dead." "I believe you," Cross said gently. "But Pike doesn't care about truth. He cares about revenge. And he's got the money and influence to make his lies stick at least long enough to get you in custody." "Which is why we need to marry," Caleb said. "Legal protection. She's my wife. She's my property under territorial law. Marshall can't just take her." Cross sat heavily in a pew, clasped his hands. "You understand what you're doing? Marriage isn't just a legal contract. It's a covenant before God. A promise to love and honor in sickness and health till death do you part." "I understand." "Do you?" Cross looked at Anna. "Both of you. Because I've married couples who thought they could use marriage as a tool, a means to an end. It never works. Marriage requires commitment, sacrifice, trust, things you can't fake." Anna spoke up, her voice steady. "Reverend, I've been married twice. Both times my husbands died protecting me or because of me. I know what marriage costs, and I know this isn't a real marriage, not in the way you mean, but my children need protection. The baby I'm carrying needs a father. If Caleb Stone is willing to give his name for that, I won't spit on his offer by pretending it needs to be more than it is." "And you," Cross turned to Caleb. "Your wife died 7 years ago. Molly, too. You've spent those years locked in grief, turning away every woman who tried to reach you. Now suddenly you're willing to marry a stranger." "She's not a stranger." "Not anymore." "You've known her 3 days." "I've known grief for 7 years. That's a longer acquaintance." Cross studied him for a long moment. "What would Sarah think of this?" The question landed like a punch. Caleb's first instinct was anger, but he forced it down. Cross wasn't trying to hurt him. He was trying to make sure Caleb had thought this through. Sarah would think I was doing the right thing, Caleb said finally. Helping someone who needs it, standing between the innocent and those who do them harm. That's who she was. That's who she'd want me to be. And Molly. Caleb looked at Grace still swinging her legs in the pew, trying to pretend she wasn't listening to every word. Molly would want me to protect Grace, to give her a chance to be a child instead of an orphan. Cross sighed, a sound heavy with resignation and something else. Approval, maybe, or at least understanding. You're sure about this, both of you, because once I say the words, once you make the vows, there's no taking them back. Not easily. I'm sure, Caleb said. Anna hesitated just for a second. Then she nodded. I'm sure. Then I suppose we have a wedding to perform. Cross stood moved to the altar, pulled out a worn Bible. Grace, sweetheart, would you like to stand with your mother? Grace jumped down from the pew, ran to Anna's side. She looked up at Caleb with those two solemn eyes. Are you really going to be my pa? The word pa caught in his chest, sharp and painful and sweet all at once. If you'll have me. What do I call you? Whatever feels right. Grace thought about this seriously. Can I call you Pa, Caleb? So I remember my other pa, but you're my pa too. Caleb's throat closed up. He managed a nod, not trusting his voice. They stood before the altar, Caleb and Anna side by side with Grace between them. Cross opened his Bible but paused before reading. Before we begin, I need to ask, is there anyone who objects to this union? The church door banged open. William Pike strode in 3 men behind him, all armed. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he walked down the aisle like he owned the place. I object, Pike said, his voice filling the small church. This wedding is a sham, a transparent attempt to evade justice. Cross didn't flinch. This is a house of God, Mr. Pike. You will show respect, or you will leave. I'll leave when I'm damn well ready. Pike stopped a few feet from the altar, looked Anna up and down with naked contempt. You think marrying him will save you Marshall's coming tomorrow, day early. I sent a telegram this morning. He'll be here by noon. Anna's hand found Caleb's squeezed tight. He squeezed back, kept his eyes on Pike. Then we'd better hurry this along, Reverend. You can't do this, Pike snarled. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. Cross's voice had gone cold, the kind of cold that came from years of standing up to bullies in the name of righteousness. This is my church. These are 2 adults seeking marriage. Unless you have legal grounds to stop them, you need to leave. Legal grounds? She's wanted for conspiracy. By a warrant that doesn't exist yet. Until that marshal arrives with official papers, Anna Blackwood is a free woman with every right to marry whom she chooses. Pike's face went red. His hand moved to his gun. Caleb's moved faster, pulling his revolver with the smooth efficiency of cavalry training. He didn't aim it at Pike, just held it loose at his side. A reminder, a warning. Don't, Caleb said quietly. The standoff stretched. Pike's men shifted nervously, hands hovering near their weapons. Grace pressed against Anna's legs, trying to make herself small. Cross stood firm at the altar, Bible in hand, looking like an Old Testament prophet, ready to call down fire from heaven. Finally, Pike stepped back. Fine. Marry her. Won't change anything. Marshall will sort it out tomorrow. And when he does, when he takes her away, you'll be left with her bastard children and the whole town laughing at you. I'll take my chances. Pike turned, stalked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, looked back. You're making a mistake, Stone. Biggest one of your life. But I suppose you're used to mistakes, like being gone when your family needed you most. The words hit like bullets. Caleb's vision went red, his finger tightening on the trigger. But Anna's hand on his arm stopped him. She shook her head, barely perceptible. Don't. He's not worth it. Caleb holstered his gun. Pike laughed a harsh, ugly sound and left. In the silence that followed, Grace started crying. Quiet sobs that shook her small frame. Anna knelt down, wincing at the movement, pulled her daughter close. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Is the marshal going to take you away? No. That's why we're here. That's why Pa Caleb and I are getting married, to keep us together. Cross cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue, before anyone else decides to interrupt. They resumed their positions at the altar. Cross opened his Bible, found the passage, began to read. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The familiar words washed over Caleb like a dream. He'd heard them before 20 years ago, standing beside Sarah in a church not unlike this one. She'd worn white, had flowers in her hair, had smiled at him like he was her whole world. This was nothing like that. Anna stood beside him in a plain dress, dusty from travel, her pregnant belly visible, her daughter clutching her skirt, her face showing strain and exhaustion and grim determination. No flowers, no white dress, no illusions about what this was. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly," Cross continued, "but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God." Caleb wondered if God approved of marriages born from desperation, if the purposes Cross spoke of included using vows as legal shields. "Caleb Stone, do you take Anna Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" For better or worse. Caleb looked at Anna's face, saw the question there. The same question she'd asked last night. "Do you want a wife or just shelter?" He still didn't have a complete answer, but he had enough of one to say, "I do." "Anna Blackwood, do you take Caleb Stone to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" Anna's voice came out steady, stronger than Caleb expected. "I do. By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, and by God Almighty, I pronounce you husband and wife." Cross smiled, the first real smile since they'd entered the church. "You may kiss your bride." The suggestion caught them both off guard. Caleb and Anna looked at each other, awkward, uncertain. They hadn't thought this far ahead, hadn't considered the physical realities of being married, even in name only. Anna solved the problem by standing on her toes and pressing a quick, chaste kiss to his cheek. Her lips were warm, soft. The gesture felt more intimate than it should have. "Congratulations," Cross said. "You're now Mr. and Mrs. Stone." Mrs. Stone. The word sounded foreign wrong. There was only one Mrs. Stone, and she was buried in the cemetery on the hill. But legally, technically, Anna was his wife now, for better or worse. Grace tugged on his sleeve. "Does this mean we're a family?" Caleb knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "I suppose it does." She threw her arms around his neck, squeezed tight. Over her shoulder, he met Anna's eyes. She looked relieved, grateful, and something else he couldn't quite name. Not love, not attraction, just a bone-deep exhaustion mixed with fragile hope. Cross produced papers for them to sign. Marriage certificate, official and legal, with their names written in careful script. Caleb signed first, his hand steady. Anna signed second, her signature shaky but legible. "I'll file this with the territorial office today," Cross said. "By tomorrow, when the marshal arrives, you'll be legally married in every sense that matters. He can't touch Anna without going through proper channels. That buys you time." "How much time?" Anna asked. "Weeks, maybe months. Long enough to find a lawyer, build a real defense, long enough to prove Pike's charges are fabricated." They left the church together, a family now in the eyes of the law, if not in truth. The street outside had filled with people. Not a crowd exactly, but more than coincidence would explain. They'd come to watch, to judge, to see what Caleb Stone would do. Margaret Hayes stood at the front, her face a mask of controlled emotion. As Caleb helped Anna onto her horse, Margaret approached. "Congratulations," she said, the word dripping with bitter irony. "I hope you know what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done." "Do you?" "You've tied yourself legally to a woman half the territory wants dead. You've made enemies of powerful people. You've thrown away any chance at a normal life." "I threw that away 7 years ago." Margaret's expression softened, just for a moment. "Sarah would have understood, you know. What you're doing, why you're doing it. She always did have a weakness for lost causes." Anna's not a lost cause. Isn't she? Thomas died for her. Grey Wolf died for her. Now you've put yourself in the line of fire. How many men have to die before she accepts that maybe she's the problem? Anna, still mounted, looked down at Margaret with something between pity and contempt. Men don't die for me, Mrs. Hayes. They die because of men like Pike, who can't stand the idea of a woman making her own choices. Thomas died because he loved me and wouldn't let a mob dictate his heart. Grey Wolf died defending his people from cowards who attacked at night. If you want to blame someone, blame the men pulling triggers, not the women they aim at. Margaret's face flushed. You speak of choices. What choice did you give Thomas? You knew what marrying you would cost him. You knew the town would never accept it, but you married him anyway. I married him because I loved him, because he asked me to, because he said he didn't care what the town thought. Anna's voice cracked slightly. And yes, he died for it, and I have to live with that every day, but I won't dishonor his memory by pretending our love was wrong. It wasn't wrong. What they did to him was wrong. The two women stared at each other, years of pain and resentment and loss hanging between them like smoke. Finally, Margaret turned away, walked back toward the general store without another word. Caleb swung into his saddle, positioned his horse beside Anna's. Grace sat in front of her mother, now tired from the emotion of the day. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the ride into town, but the silence felt different, heavier, more permanent. They were married now. He had a wife. She had a husband. It didn't feel real, but the certificate in his saddlebag said otherwise. Doc Harrison met them at the ranch, standing on the porch with his medical bag. His expression was grave. "How's Ben?" Anna asked, dismounting with Caleb's help. "Better. Fever broke about an hour ago. He's sleeping now, but he asked for you." Relief flooded Anna's face. She hurried inside, Grace trailing behind. Caleb stayed with Harrison, both men watching the women disappear into the cabin. "You married her," Harrison said. "Not a question." "Had to." Had to or wanted to? Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't sure he knew the difference anymore. Harrison pulled him aside, voice low. "The marshal's coming tomorrow. Pike's right about that. I heard it from Sheriff Ward. Name's Crawford, federal man, tough as nails. He won't be easy to fool." "We're not trying to fool him. We're married, legally. That's not a crime." "No, but the timing looks suspicious. Crawford's not stupid. He'll see it for what it is." "Which is a desperate measure by desperate people." Harrison's expression softened. "Not that I blame you. Hell, I'd probably do the same. But you need to be ready for questions, for scrutiny, for Pike to make this as ugly as he possibly can." Caleb nodded slowly, the weight of what he'd done settling over him like a blanket. He'd thought the hard part was deciding to marry Anna. Now he realized that was just the beginning. That night they ate dinner together in the main house. Ben was well enough to sit at the table, though he mostly pushed food around his plate. Grace chattered about the wedding, about how Pa Caleb was part of the family, now about how they were going to stay at the ranch forever. Anna said little, her eyes distant, one hand resting on her belly. Every so often, Caleb caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or regret. After the children were put to bed in the cabin, Anna returned to the main house, found Caleb sitting on the porch watching the stars. "Can I sit?" she asked. He gestured to the chair beside him. She lowered herself carefully, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. For a while they sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, a distant coyote, the wind moving through the sagebrush. "Thank you," Anna said finally. "For today, for everything." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I need to say it again. What you did marrying me, putting yourself at risk. Most men wouldn't." "Most men aren't me." She smiled faintly. "No, they're not." More silence. Caleb felt her presence beside him like a physical thing, warm and solid and undeniably real. His wife. The thought still felt foreign. "Can I ask you something?" Anna said. "Go ahead." "Why did you really do it? And don't say it was just to help. There are other ways you could have helped without marrying me." Caleb considered his answer carefully. She deserved honesty, but he wasn't sure he had it to give. His motivations were tangled, knotted together in ways he couldn't fully untangle. "I told you before, when my family died, something in me died too. I've been walking around like a ghost for 7 years. Then you showed up, and Grace and Ben, and suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to care about something other than ghosts." "That's still not a reason to marry me." "No," he admitted, "but it's a start." She turned in her chair, studied his face in the starlight. What would be enough? What would make it a real marriage instead of just a legal shield? The question again. Different words, same meaning. "Do you want a wife or just shelter?" "I don't know," Caleb said honestly. "I don't know if I'm capable of that anymore, of being a real husband, of opening myself up to the kind of loss I experienced before. I'm not asking you to love me. I know that's not possible. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I need to know if you see me as a person or just a problem to solve." He looked at her properly then. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion carved into her face, the way she held herself despite the pain he knew she must be in. Saw the strength it took to keep going when everything had been taken from her. Saw the fierce protectiveness in the way she spoke about her children. "I see you," he said quietly. "I see a woman who's survived things that would have broken most people. I see a mother who'd walk through fire for her children. I see someone who's been beaten down and keeps getting back up. Is that enough? For what? For you to want this, not just accept it, but want it." Caleb thought about Sarah, about the promises he'd made at her grave, to never forget, to never replace her, to carry his guilt like a badge of honor. For 7 years he'd kept those promises. For 7 years he'd been faithful to the memory of what he'd lost. But now, sitting beside Anna under a sky full of stars, he wondered if maybe Sarah would have wanted something different for him. Not to forget, but to forgive himself. Not to replace her, but to allow himself to live again. "I want you to be safe," he said finally. "I want your children to have a chance to grow up without fear. I want the baby you're carrying to be born healthy. If that's what wanting this means, then yes, I want it." Anna nodded slowly, accepting the answer, even if it wasn't quite what she'd hoped for. She stood, moved toward the cabin, paused at the edge of the porch. "Caleb, earlier today at the church I asked you to promise me something." "I remember. I'm asking again. When this is over, when we're safe, you'll answer my question honestly. Not about marriage, the other one." "I will." She walked back to the cabin, left him alone with his thoughts and the stars. Caleb sat there long into the night, turning everything over in his mind. The wedding. The warrant. Pike's threats. Anna's question. "Do you want a wife, or just shelter?" He pulled Molly's doll from his pocket, held it in the darkness. "What do you think, Molly girl? Am I doing right by you? By your mama?" The doll, as always, offered no answer, but somehow, sitting there with it in his hands, Caleb felt a loosening in his chest. Like maybe, just maybe, he'd been carrying his guilt wrong all these years. Maybe the way to honor Sarah and Molly wasn't to live like a ghost. Maybe it was to live like they would have wanted him to live, with purpose, with compassion, with the courage to care. He tucked the doll back in his pocket, went inside, checked his rifles one more time. Tomorrow the marshal would come. Tomorrow Pike would make his play. Tomorrow everything could fall apart. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Caleb Stone went to bed knowing he'd done something that mattered, something Sarah would have approved of. He'd stood between the innocent and those who'd hurt them. He'd given shelter to the homeless. He'd made vows he intended to keep, even if he didn't fully understand them yet. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough. The morning came too fast. Caleb woke to the sound of horses, many of them approaching from the east. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. 8 riders, led by a man in a black suit on a gray horse. Federal marshal had to be. Pike rode beside him along with Sheriff Ward and 5 armed deputies. Caleb stepped onto the porch rifle held loose. Anna emerged from the cabin, Grace and Ben behind her. She'd dressed carefully, put her hair up, made herself look as respectable as possible. Still, her pregnant belly was obvious, undeniable. The marshal dismounted, a tall man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and a face like carved granite. He pulled papers from his saddlebag, approached the porch. "Caleb Stone." "That's me. I'm Marshal Henry Crawford. I have a warrant for the arrest of Anna Blackwood on charges of aiding and abetting Apache raiders, conspiracy to commit murder and theft of federal property." He held out the papers. Caleb didn't take them. "Anna Blackwood doesn't live here," Caleb said calmly. Crawford frowned. "Pike said she was here." "She was, but Anna Blackwood doesn't exist anymore." "The hell are you talking about?" "My wife's name is Anna Stone. She married me yesterday. Reverend Cross officiated. It's been filed with the territorial office. You want to arrest her? You need a court order from a federal judge, not a territorial warrant." Crawford's expression darkened. He turned to Pike. "You said she was a widow." "She was," Pike sputtered. "Yesterday morning she was, but not yesterday afternoon." Crawford looked at the papers in his hand, then at Anna standing on the cabin porch, then back at Caleb. "You're telling me you married this woman in the past 24 hours? "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Convenient timing." "Legal timing." Crawford studied him for a long moment. Behind him, Pike was turning red hands, clenching into fists. "This is a sham. They married to avoid arrest. You can't let them get away with this." "Mr. Pike, be quiet." Crawford kept his eyes on Caleb. "I've been a marshal for 20 years. I've seen every trick in the book. Marriage as a legal shield is one of the oldest." "Then you know it's legitimate," Caleb said. "Legitimate maybe, but it doesn't erase the charges, just complicates the process. Which means you need to leave. Come back when you have proper authorization to arrest a married woman from her husband's property." Crawford's jaw tightened. For a moment, Caleb thought he might push the issue, might arrest Anna anyway and deal with the legal fallout later. But Crawford was a federal man bound by regulations, procedures. He couldn't just ignore the law, even when it frustrated him. "I'll be back," Crawford said, "with the proper paperwork. In the meantime, Mrs. Stone is not to leave the territory. Is that understood?" "Understood." Crawford swung back into his saddle, gestured for his men to mount up. Pike leaned close, said something Caleb couldn't hear. Crawford shook his head sharply, said something back that made Pike's face go even redder. As they rode out, Pike turned in his saddle, locked eyes with Caleb. The message was clear. This isn't over. When the dust settled, Anna walked over, slowly stood beside Caleb on the porch. She was shaking, adrenaline and fear catching up with her now that the danger had passed. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Couple weeks if we're lucky, maybe less." "And then we need proof that Pike's charges are false. We need witnesses. We need evidence." "I don't have evidence. I lived with Grey Wolf's people. I can't prove I didn't help them raid settlements." Caleb looked down at her, saw the despair creeping into her eyes. She'd been strong for so long, but everyone had their breaking point. "Then we find someone who can prove it. We find the truth and we shove it down Pike's throat until he chokes on it." She laughed, a sound halfway between hysteria and genuine amusement. "You have a lot of faith in truth. I have faith in stubbornness, and I'm the most stubborn man you'll ever meet." Grace ran over, threw her arms around Caleb's waist. "Are they gone? Is Mama safe?" "For now," Caleb said, ruffling her hair. "For now." But as he watched the dust from the marshal's horses fade into the distance, he wondered how long for now would last, and what he'd have to do when it ran out. The next 2 weeks fell into an uneasy routine. Caleb worked the ranch, Anna managed the house, the children adapted to their new life with the resilience only the young possess. Ben's health improved daily. Grace started calling Caleb Pa without the Caleb attached, just Pa, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Anna's pregnancy advanced visibly. She was nearly 5 months now. her belly noticeably rounder, the baby beginning to show signs of movement that Anna felt but Caleb couldn't yet see. She moved slower, tired easier, but never complained. They existed in a strange limbo, married but not married, a family but not a family. They ate meals together, worked side by side, shared a house but not a bed. Caleb slept in the main house, Anna and the children in the cabin. Proper, respectable, safe. But something was changing. Caleb felt it in the way Anna looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching. Felt it in the comfortable silences that stretched between them. Felt it in the way Grace came to him with scraped knees and Ben asked him to teach him to rope. They were becoming something. He wasn't sure what yet, but something. Then one evening, 3 weeks after the wedding, everything shifted. Caleb was in the barn mending tack when he heard Grace scream. Not a playful scream, a terrified one. He grabbed the pitchfork, ran outside. Grace stood in the yard pointing at the horizon, a dust cloud massive coming fast. Too many riders to count. Anna emerged from the cabin, took one look and went pale. "It's them. Pike's men." Caleb counted quickly. 20 horses, maybe more. This wasn't a legal visit. This was something else. "Get the children inside," he ordered. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Anna didn't argue. She herded Grace and Ben into the cabin, slammed the door. Caleb heard the bolt slide home. He ran to the house, grabbed his rifle and revolver, checked the ammunition. Plenty of bullets. Not enough for 20 men, but plenty to make a point. The riders stopped 50 yards from the house, formed a loose semicircle. Pike sat at the center, a rifle across his saddle. But he wasn't alone. William Hayes, Margaret's late husband's business partner, flanked him on one side. On the other, a man Caleb didn't recognize, dressed in expensive clothes that marked him as someone important. "Stone," Pike called. "Time to settle this." Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. "You're on my land. Leave." "Can't do that. See, we've got business to discuss. About your wife." "My wife is none of your business." The well-dressed man spoke up, his voice cultured, educated. "Actually, Mr. Stone, she is our business. My name is Jonathan Hartwell. I'm an attorney representing several business interests in Copper Ridge. Your wife prior to your marriage was wanted on serious charges. Those charges haven't disappeared just because she changed her last name. Marshal Crawford said he needed proper authorization. Has he got it? Not yet, but he will. In the meantime, we're here to make you an offer." "I'm not interested." "Hear me out." Hartwell smiled, the kind of smile lawyers practiced in mirrors. "Give us Anna. Let us take her into custody pending trial. In exchange, we'll guarantee the safety of her children. They'll be placed in good homes, raised properly, given every advantage." "No. Mr. Stone, be reasonable. If you fight this, if you force our hand, things will get ugly. For you, for the children, for everyone. But if you cooperate, we can end this peacefully." I said no. Pike's face twisted with rage. "You stubborn son of a bitch. We're trying to do you a favor. That woman is poison. She'll get you killed just like she got Thomas killed, just like she got Grey Wolf killed. Then I'll die. Won't be the first time. You want to die for a whore, for Apache scum?" Caleb's finger moved to the trigger. "Call her that again, please." The standoff stretched. 20 men with guns against one. The math was simple, brutal, but Caleb had fought worse odds during the war, had survived when he shouldn't have. He'd do it again if he had to. The cabin door opened. Anna stepped out alone. No children visible behind her. "No," Caleb said sharply. "Get back inside." Anna ignored him. She walked across the yard, stood beside him on the porch. Her hand found his squeezed once, then let go. A gesture of solidarity, of partnership. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying across the yard, "I know why you're here. Mr. Pike wants me dead because I rejected him years ago and had the audacity to survive when he tried to have me killed. Mr. Hartwell wants me gone because I'm bad for business, a reminder that this town builds its wealth on stolen land and murdered families. And the rest of you, you're here because you're paid to be, or because you're cowards who can only feel brave in a mob." Pike started to respond, but Anna cut him off. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to go back to town and tell Marshal Crawford that if he wants to arrest me, he can come himself with proper papers during daylight hours. And if any of you try to take me by force, my husband will kill as many of you as he can before you kill him. And then you'll have to explain to Marshal Crawford why you started a gunfight over a pregnant woman. You think we care, Pike snarled. You think the law will protect you. I think the law protects property, and I'm Caleb Stone's property now. You take me, you're stealing from him. That's a hanging offense last I checked. Hartwell shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He was a lawyer, understood the implications. Anna was right. Legally taking her by force was theft, kidnapping, maybe even assault on Caleb's property rights. The law was ugly, sometimes treated women like furniture, but right now that ugliness was the only shield they had. "This is ridiculous," Hartwell said. "You can't hide behind marriage forever." "I'm not hiding. I'm standing right here. Come arrest me if you can do it legally. Otherwise, leave." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Hartwell turned his horse, started back toward town. Slowly, reluctantly, the other men followed, all except Pike. He stayed where he was, staring at Anna with pure hatred. "You think you won? You think this is over?" "I think you're outnumbered," Anna said calmly. 19 of your men just rode off. It's just you now. So unless you want to try your luck against a pregnant woman and a cavalry veteran, I suggest you follow them." Pike's hand moved to his gun. Caleb's rifle came up, aimed at Pike's chest. "Go ahead," Caleb said softly. "Give me a reason." Pike must have seen something in Caleb's eyes, some echo of the soldier who'd killed 11 Apache warriors in hand-to-hand combat. He lowered his hand, but his face promised retribution. "Soon," Pike said. "Very soon all your cleverness won't matter. The law's coming for you. And when it does, I'll be there to watch." He rode off, leaving Caleb and Anna alone in the dusty yard. Anna's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the porch steps, one hand pressed to her belly, the other shaking. Oh, God, I thought he was going to shoot." Caleb sat beside her, set the rifle down. He might have if Hartwell hadn't been here. Lawyers make things complicated. "How long?" "Until they come back with proper authority week, maybe 2. "That's not enough time." "Then we make it enough." She turned to look at him, and the fear in her eyes cut deeper than any bullet. "Caleb, what if we can't prove I'm innocent? What if Pike's lies are too well constructed? What then?" "Then we run. Mexico, California, somewhere they can't reach." "You'd do that? Give up your ranch, your home, your whole life?" He thought about it seriously. The ranch meant something, represented years of work of trying to build something after everything had been destroyed. But it was just land, just buildings. Sarah and Molly weren't here. They were in the ground on the hill, and he'd carry them in his heart wherever he went. "I would," he said, "if it kept you and the children safe." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why do you care so much?" And there it was again, the question underneath all the other questions. Why do you care? Do you want a wife or just shelter? Caleb looked at her, sitting beside him, exhausted and frightened and still somehow defiant. Looked at the cabin where Grace and Ben waited, trusting him to protect them. Looked at the ranch he'd built to escape his grief. "I don't know," he said honestly. "When you first asked me that question at the church, I didn't have an answer. I'm still not sure I do. But I know that having you here makes me feel less like a ghost and more like a man. I know that teaching Grace to ride gives me purpose. I know that when Ben calls me Pa, something in my chest doesn't hurt quite so much. Is that love? I don't know, maybe, or maybe it's just the beginning of something that could become love if we let it." Anna leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact beyond necessity. The weight of her, the warmth felt both foreign and right. "I asked you to promise me something," she said softly. "At the church. Do you remember?" "I remember." "I'm going to ask you now, not when this is over. Now, because tomorrow might be too late." Caleb knew what was coming. The question. The real one. the one that mattered more than warrants or marshals or Pike's revenge. Caleb Stone. Anna's voice was steady now, no longer shaking. Do you want a wife, or do you just want shelter? He could have hedged, could have given her the safe answer, the one that didn't require him to be vulnerable. But she'd been brave enough to ask. The least he could do was be brave enough to answer honestly. I want both, he said quietly. I want you to be safe, yes. I want to protect you and the children. That's shelter. But I also want... He paused, searching for words that felt true. I want to wake up and see you in the kitchen. I want to hear Grace laugh. I want to teach Ben to ride. I want to be there when the baby is born. I want a family again, even though it terrifies me. Even though I'm afraid of losing everything again. He turned to face her properly. So yes, Anna, I want a wife. I want you. Not just as a responsibility or a burden to carry. As a partner. As someone who matters to me. Maybe that's not the same as the love you had with Thomas or Grey Wolf. Maybe it's something different, something that grew out of necessity and survival. But it's real, and it's yours if you want it. Tears streamed down Anna's face. Happy tears, sad tears, relieved tears, all mixed together. You foolish man, you beautiful foolish man. She kissed him. Not on the cheek this time, but properly on the lips. It was gentle, tentative, like neither of them quite remembered how. But it was also warm and real and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Was that the right answer? It was the honest answer. That's better than right. They sat there on the porch as the sun set, holding each other, while Grace and Ben peeked through the cabin window, watching their parents with the wide-eyed wonder of children witnessing something important. That night, for the first time since they'd married, Anna didn't return to the cabin. She stayed in the main house in Caleb's room in his bed, not for passion or desire, but for comfort, for the simple human need to not be alone. They lay side by side in the darkness, her pregnant belly pressed against him, his arm around her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing me, for choosing us. Thank you for asking the question, for making me answer it. Are you scared? Terrified. Me too. But despite the fear, despite the knowledge that Pike and the marshal and the whole weight of the law was coming for them, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Peace. Not the peace of isolation, of numbness, of grief so deep it became normal, but the peace of purpose, of connection, of mattering to someone and having them matter back. Sarah would have approved. Molly, too. They'd have wanted him to live, not just exist, to love again, not just remember. And so, holding his wife in the darkness, Caleb Stone allowed himself to hope. Just a little, just enough. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, as husband and wife, as family, for better or worse till death do them part. He'd meant those vows when he'd spoken them. Now finally he understood them too. The peaceful days ended on a Tuesday morning when Sheriff Ward rode up to the ranch alone, his face grim as a funeral. Caleb was mending fence posts when he saw the dust recognized Ward's sorrel mare even from a distance. He set down his tools, walked to meet him at the property line. Anna watched from the porch, one hand shading her eyes, the other resting on her belly. 5 months pregnant now, her belly swollen and firm, the baby active enough that sometimes Caleb could see gentle movements beneath her dress. Ward dismounted, pulled off his hat. Sweat stained the band despite the cool November morning. Caleb, we need to talk. About the warrant. About more than that. Ward glanced toward the house, lowered his voice. Crawford got his authorization. Federal judge in Santa Fe signed off on it. He'll be here Friday with a full detail. 10 men, maybe more. And this time, there's no legal loophole. The warrant's ironclad. Caleb absorbed this information slowly. 3 days. They had 3 days before everything fell apart. What charges? Same as before, aiding Apache raiders. But they've added something new. Accessory to murder. They're saying Anna helped plan an attack on a settler family last spring, got 3 witnesses willing to testify they saw her there. That's impossible. Anna was with Grey Wolf's people last spring. They're peaceful. They haven't raided in years. Pike's witnesses say different. And in a territorial court, white witnesses trump the word of an Apache widow. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. He's fabricating evidence. Of course he is. But proving that and stopping the arrest are 2 different things. Ward put his hat back on, looked Caleb in the eye. I'm telling you this because I owe you. You saved my life during the war, but officially I can't help you. Crawford's a federal man. I'm just a county sheriff. When he comes Friday, I'll have to stand aside. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you grasp how bad this is. Crawford's not playing games. He's got orders to bring Anna in by any means necessary. If you resist, he's authorized to use force. Against you, against the children, against anyone who gets in his way. Anna had walked over during this conversation, moved quietly enough that Ward startled when he saw her. "Sheriff," she said calmly, "what happens if I turn myself in?" "No," Caleb said sharply. Anna ignored him. "What happens, Sheriff, if I go willingly?" Ward looked uncomfortable. "You'd be taken to Santa Fe for trial. Could be months before it comes to court. You'd be held in custody the whole time." "And the baby?" Ward's expression darkened. "Territorial law says if a prisoner gives birth in custody, the child becomes a ward of the state. You'd have no rights to it." Anna's hand moved protectively to her belly. "They'd take my baby." "Yes. And my other children, Grace and Ben. Without a mother, and with you married to Caleb, they'd likely stay here. But if anything happened to Caleb during the arrest, they'd go to an orphanage." The implication was clear. Pike was counting on Caleb to resist, counting on Crawford to have an excuse to use lethal force. Then Anna would be in custody, Caleb would be dead, and the children would be scattered to the winds, clean, efficient, legal. "There has to be another way," Anna said, but her voice held no conviction. She knew as well as Caleb that the walls were closing in. Ward mounted his horse, looked down at them with genuine regret. "If there is, I don't see it. I'm sorry. Truly." He rode off, leaving Caleb and Anna standing in the yard, the weight of Friday hanging over them like a storm cloud. "We could run," Anna said quietly. "Tonight. Take the children and head for Mexico. You're 6 months pregnant. Hard riding could kill you or the baby. Staying could kill us all." She wasn't wrong. But running felt like surrender, like admitting Pike had won. And Caleb Stone didn't surrender. Not during the war. Not when Sarah and Molly died. Not now. "There's still time," he said. 3 days. We can find something. Some proof that Pike's lying." "What proof? The witnesses are bought and paid for. The judge signed the warrant. Even if we prove Pike orchestrated the whole thing, it won't matter. The law's on his side." Caleb looked at his wife. Really looked at her. Dark circles under her eyes from worry and poor sleep. Her dress straining across her pregnant belly. Her hands never quite still, always moving to protect the life growing inside her. She'd been strong for so long, fought for so long. Now she was asking him to accept the inevitable. But Caleb had learned something these past weeks. Sometimes strength wasn't about fighting. Sometimes it was about knowing when to protect what mattered most. "We'll figure something out," he promised, though he had no idea what. That night Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, Molly's doll in his hands, turning it over and over. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "Be safe. Come back to us." He'd promised he would. Broken that promise. Now he was making promises to Anna he might not be able to keep. The door opened. Reverend Cross stepped inside, uninvited, but not unexpected. The old minister had a way of appearing when people needed him most. "Heard about Friday," Cross said, sitting down without being asked. "Ward told me." "Then you know we're out of options." "I know it looks that way." Cross pulled a flask from his coat, set it on the table. "But I've been doing some thinking, and some investigating." Caleb looked up. "What kind of investigating?" The kind that involves asking uncomfortable questions in uncomfortable places. Like how Pike's witnesses all work for him. Like how they all suddenly remembered seeing Anna at a raid that happened 6 months ago, right around the time Pike offered them bonuses. That's circumstantial. Won't hold up in court. No, but this might. Cross pulled papers from his coat, spread them on the table. These are land deeds, filed in Santa Fe 3 months ago. Pike's been buying up property around here, consolidating his holdings, including a rather large parcel that used to belong to Thomas Blackwood. Caleb studied the documents. So Pike profited from Thomas's death. That's not surprising. No, but the dates are. Pike filed the deed 2 weeks before Thomas was killed. How did he know the land would be available? The implication hit like a fist. Pike hadn't just taken advantage of Thomas's death. He'd orchestrated it, planned it, filed paperwork in advance because he knew Thomas would be dead. That's murder, Caleb said slowly. Premeditated murder. And if Pike killed Thomas, then his whole crusade against Anna isn't about justice. It's about covering his tracks. She's the only person who might know enough to connect him to Thomas's death. Does she? I don't know, but Pike thinks she does. That's enough. Caleb's mind raced. If they could prove Pike murdered Thomas, the whole case against Anna would collapse. The witnesses would be exposed as liars. The warrant would be worthless. But proving it meant getting Pike to confess or finding evidence that didn't exist. How do we use this? Caleb asked. Cross smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd already thought several steps ahead. We don't. Margaret Hayes does. Margaret. She's been doing her own investigating. Seems she never believed her husband's death was an accident. And she's found some interesting connections between Pike and that accident. She's willing to testify, to make a statement that Pike murdered not just Thomas, but her husband too. Caleb stared at the Reverend. Why would she help Anna? Because Margaret Hayes is a lot of things, but she's not a coward, and she's tired of watching Pike destroy lives with impunity. Also, Cross added with a slight smile, she likes you, Caleb. Always has. This is her way of making sure you don't get yourself killed over a woman. Even if that woman is Anna. Especially because that woman is Anna. Margaret understands loss. Understands what it means to survive when the person you love doesn't. She wants you to have a chance at happiness, even if it's not with her. Caleb picked up the papers, studied them carefully. The dates, the signatures, the careful trail of evidence. It was enough to raise questions, maybe enough to delay the warrant. But would it be enough to stop Crawford on Friday? What's your plan? Caleb asked. Tomorrow we present this evidence to Crawford directly. We show him that Pike's been manipulating the legal system for personal gain. We give him a reason to question the warrant's validity. Crawford's not going to listen. He's a federal marshal. He follows orders. True. But he's also an honest man. I checked his record. 20 years of service, not a single corruption charge. If we can show him he's being used, if we can prove Pike's witnesses are unreliable, he might delay the arrest pending further investigation. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was something. When? Caleb asked. Tomorrow afternoon. I've already sent word to Crawford that we have information relevant to his case. He's agreed to meet at my church at 2 o'clock. And if it doesn't work? Cross's expression turned somber. Then you have 1 day to say your goodbyes and get Anna and the children somewhere safe. After Cross left, Caleb sat alone with the papers, reading them over and over until he'd memorized every word. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Pike had known Thomas would die, had positioned himself to profit from it. That suggested planning foreknowledge involvement. But proving involvement and proving guilt were different things. They'd need more than dates on a deed. They'd need testimony witnesses, something concrete. Anna appeared in the doorway wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. Can't sleep. Too much to think about. She moved to the table, sat across from him, looked at the papers. What are these? He explained. About Cross's investigation, about the land deeds, about Margaret's willingness to testify. Anna listened without interrupting, her face unreadable in the lamplight. When he finished, she said, "It won't work." It might. No. She shook her head slowly. Pike's too careful. He'll have explanations for everything. The dates are coincidence. The land purchase was opportunistic, not premeditated. Margaret's testimony will be dismissed as the ravings of a bitter widow. Crawford will go through with the arrest because that's what the law says to do. So what do you want me to do? Give up. I want you to be realistic. I want you to accept that sometimes the bad people win. That sometimes justice is just a word powerful men use to justify their cruelty. Caleb stood, paced to the window, looked out at the darkness. I can't accept that. Won't. Why? Because you're stubborn. Because if I accept that Pike wins if I let them take you, then what was the point? What was the point of marrying you, of making promises to Grace and Ben, of letting myself care again? It was all for nothing. Anna rose, walked to him, put her hand on his arm. It wasn't for nothing. You gave me hope. You gave my children safety, even if only for a little while. You reminded me that not all men are like Pike. Some men still do the right thing even when it costs them. I'm not letting them take you. You might not have a choice. He turned, pulled her close despite her pregnant belly between them, held her like he could protect her from what was coming through sheer force of will. Then we run, he said into her hair. Tonight, we take the children and we ride hard for Mexico. Damn the risk. Damn everything. I won't watch you dragged away in chains. Anna pulled back, looked up at him with tears in her eyes. And if I die on the trail, if the baby dies, if we lose everything trying to run, then at least we tried. At least we didn't surrender. She kissed him deep and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the taste of him. When they broke apart, she whispered, I love you, Caleb Stone. I didn't mean to, didn't plan to, but I do. I love you too. The words came easier than he expected. I love you and Grace and Ben and the baby you're carrying. You're my family, and I protect my family. They stood there holding each other as the night deepened, knowing that tomorrow might bring answers or might bring disaster, but either way, they'd face it together. The meeting with Crawford took place in the church neutral ground. Caleb and Anna arrived early, bringing Grace and Ben despite Anna's protests. Caleb wanted Crawford to see the children to understand what his warrant would destroy. Reverend Cross waited at the altar papers spread out like evidence in a trial. Margaret Hayes sat in the front pew dressed in black, her face composed but determined. Marshal Crawford arrived precisely at 2, accompanied by Sheriff Ward. He was a tall man with iron-gray hair and a face that had seen too much ugliness to be easily shocked. But when he saw Anna's pregnant belly, something flickered in his eyes. Discomfort, maybe, or doubt. Mrs. Stone, he said, nodding politely. Mr. Stone, Reverend Cross said you have information relevant to my investigation. We do. Cross gestured to the papers. These are land deeds filed by William Pike 3 months ago. They include property that belonged to Thomas Blackwood, Anna's first husband. The dates prove Pike filed for the land 2 weeks before Thomas was killed. Crawford examined the documents carefully, his expression unreadable. Opportunistic, perhaps, but not illegal. No, but it suggests foreknowledge. Pike knew Thomas would die. How? Thomas was murdered by a mob, Crawford said. Public execution. Lots of people could have anticipated it. A mob Pike organized, Margaret Hayes spoke up. I have testimony from 3 men who say Pike paid them to participate in the lynching, promised them land and money if they'd help remove Thomas Blackwood from the equation. Crawford turned to her eyes narrowed. And you're willing to testify to this? I am, under oath in federal court. Pike killed my husband too, made it look like an accident. But I have evidence. Letters, financial records, witnesses. He's been eliminating anyone who gets in his way for years. The marshal studied her for a long moment. Margaret didn't flinch, held his gaze with the determination of a woman who'd decided truth mattered more than safety. These are serious allegations, Crawford said finally. If they're true, Pike should be arrested, not Mrs. Stone. If they're true, Caleb echoed. That's why we're asking for a delay. Time to investigate properly, time to verify the evidence before you execute a warrant that might be based on lies. Crawford walked to the window, looked out at the town. For a long time, nobody spoke. Grace fidgeted in the pew, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Ben leaned against Anna, half asleep. "I've been a marshal for 20 years, Crawford said, not turning around. "I've seen corrupt sheriffs, lying witnesses, judges who take bribes. But I've also learned that the law is the law. My job isn't to investigate every allegation of misconduct. My job is to execute warrants." "Even when the warrant is corrupt?" Anna asked. "Even then. Because if I start picking and choosing which warrants to honor based on my personal judgment, I become the problem. The law stops meaning anything." "So you're going through with it?" Anna's voice was flat, defeated. Crawford turned back. "I didn't say that." Hope flickered in Caleb's chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to verify this information, which takes time. 3 days, maybe 4, during which the warrant is technically active, but I'm too busy conducting due diligence to execute it." Understanding dawned. Crawford was giving them time, not because he believed Anna was innocent necessarily, but because he wasn't certain she was guilty, and uncertainty was enough to justify a delay. "How much time?" Caleb asked. "A week, maybe more if the investigation proves complicated. But after that I have to act. Warrant's valid, and I'm bound by law to execute it unless I find proof it's fraudulent." "A week's not enough. It's what I can give you." Crawford picked up his hat, settled it on his head. "Use it wisely. And Mrs. Stone, if you're thinking of running, don't. I'll have men watching the roads. You try to leave the territory, I'll have no choice but to pursue." He left Ward following behind with an apologetic glance. When they were gone, Caleb turned to Cross and Margaret. "Now what?" "Now we find proof," Cross said. "Real proof that ties Pike to Thomas's murder, witnesses who'll testify, evidence that can't be explained away. In a week. In a week." Margaret stood, smoothed her dress. "I'll talk to the men I mentioned, the ones Pike paid. They're scared of him, but maybe they're more scared of being accessories to murder. And I'll go through church records," Cross added. "Sometimes people confess things to clergy they wouldn't tell the law. Maybe someone said something useful. It wasn't much, but it was something." That week passed in a blur of desperate activity. Caleb worked the ranch during the day, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the children. At night, he met with Cross and Margaret, going over evidence, tracking down witnesses, piecing together Pike's web of corruption. They found pieces, small things. A ranch hand who'd seen Pike arguing with Thomas the day before the lynching. A banker who'd processed suspicious land transfers. A deputy who'd been told to look the other way when the mob formed. But nothing concrete. Nothing that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. Pike had been careful, left no clear trail. Anna grew more withdrawn as the days passed. She spent hours sitting in the cabin, hands on her belly, talking quietly to the baby. Grace stayed close to her, sensing her mother's fear. Ben asked questions Caleb couldn't answer. On the 7th day, Margaret came to the ranch in the evening, her face ashen. "One of my witnesses is dead," she said without preamble. "The ranch hand who saw Pike arguing with Thomas. Found him this morning in the creek, neck broken. Sheriff Ward's calling it an accident." "It wasn't an accident," Caleb said. "Of course it wasn't. Pike's cleaning up loose ends. The other 2 witnesses won't talk now. They're too scared." Anna appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl despite the mild evening. "So it's over. We tried and we failed." "We still have time," Caleb insisted. "Time for what?" "To find more witnesses who'll end up dead. To dig for evidence that doesn't exist." Anna's voice cracked. "I'm tired, Caleb. Tired of fighting. Tired of running. Tired of being the reason people die." "You're not the reason. Pike is." "Doesn't matter. The result's the same. Thomas died because of me. Gray Wolf died because of me. That ranch hand died because of me. How many more before I accept that maybe I'm the problem?" "Stop it." Caleb crossed to her, took her shoulders. "You are not the problem. Men who use violence to get what they want are the problem. Men who think they own women like property are the problem. You're just trying to survive." "I'm so tired of surviving." She collapsed against him sobbing. Not the quiet tears she'd shed before, but deep wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Caleb held her, looked over her head at Margaret. "When does Crawford's time run out?" "Tomorrow," Margaret said quietly. "He'll come tomorrow morning with the warrant." 12 hours. They had 12 hours to find a miracle or accept defeat. That night Caleb made his decision. When Anna was asleep, he saddled his horse and rode into town, to Pike's ranch, to end this the only way he knew how. The ranch house was dark except for one lamp burning in the study. Caleb tied his horse a quarter-mile away, approached on foot rifle in hand. The front door was unlocked. Arrogant or a trap, either way Caleb didn't care. He found Pike in the study sitting behind a massive oak desk with a glass of whiskey looking like he'd been expecting company. "Caleb Stone," Pike smiled. "I wondered when you'd come." "We're done playing games." "Are we? I rather enjoy games." Pike gestured to a chair. "Sit, have a drink. Let's talk like civilized men." "There's nothing civilized about you?" "Perhaps not, but I'm practical, and right now I'm offering you a way out." Caleb stayed standing, rifle pointed at Pike's chest. "I'm listening. Give me Anna. Let Crawford take her tomorrow without resistance. In exchange, I'll make sure her trial is fair, quick, maybe even merciful. And the children, I'll personally guarantee they stay with you. No orphanages, no separations." "Your word means nothing." "My word is backed by money and power, which in this territory means everything." Pike sipped his whiskey. "Think about it. You get to keep the children, raise them as your own. Anna gets a trial, a chance to defend herself. It's more than she deserves." "She deserves everything. You deserve a bullet." "Probably. But shooting me won't save her. Kill me, and you're a murderer. Crawford will arrest you both. The children will end up in an orphanage anyway. You'll have achieved nothing but proving you're as violent as everyone says." The logic was sound, which made it worse. Killing Pike would feel good for about 10 seconds. Then it would destroy everything. "Why her?" Caleb asked. "Why Anna? You could have any woman, any land. Why this vendetta?" Pike's smile faded. "Because she said no. 10 years ago I offered her everything. My name, my wealth, my protection. And she looked at me like I was dirt. Chose Thomas Blackwood instead. A merchant, a nobody. So this is about your pride. This is about order, about knowing your place. Women don't get to choose. They get to accept what's offered or suffer the consequences. Anna chose wrong. Twice. I'm simply administering those consequences." "You're insane." "No. I'm inevitable." Pike stood, walked to the window. "Tomorrow Crawford arrests Anna. Next month she stands trial, the month after she hangs. Or maybe she dies in childbirth in a prison cell. Either way the result's the same. She pays for her presumption. And you, Caleb Stone, you get to live with the knowledge that you couldn't save her, just like you couldn't save your first family." The words hit their target. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. "Do it," Pike said calmly. "Pull the trigger. Kill me. Prove me right. Prove you're just another violent man unable to control himself." Caleb stood there, rifle aimed, every instinct screaming at him to shoot, to end Pike's evil existence, to avenge Thomas and Grey Wolf and that ranch hand and everyone else Pike had destroyed. But Anna's words echoed in his mind. "I'm tired of being the reason people die." If Caleb killed Pike, he'd prove Pike's point. That violence was the only answer. That men like them were no different from men like Pike, just on different sides of the law. He lowered the rifle. Pike laughed. "That's what I thought. You're weak, Stone. Just like Thomas. Just like Grey Wolf. Weak men who think morality is strength. But in this world, strength is strength. Power is power. And I have both." "Maybe," Caleb said. "But I have something you'll never understand." "What's that?" "People who die for me because they love me, not because I paid them. You'll die alone, Pike, surrounded by people who are only there for your money, and when you're gone, nobody will mourn." He turned, walked out. Behind him, Pike's laughter followed, mocking and cruel. Caleb rode home through the darkness, feeling like a failure. He'd had Pike alone, unarmed, vulnerable. Could have ended this. Instead, he'd walked away. Chosen morality over practicality. Sarah would have been proud, Molly too, but their approval wouldn't save Anna. He arrived at the ranch to find chaos, lights blazing in every window, Doc Harrison's horse tied out front, and screaming. Anna's screaming. Caleb ran inside. Found Harrison in the bedroom, Anna on the bed, her dress soaked with blood. "What happened?" Caleb demanded. "Labor," Harrison said tersely, hands working. "Early. Too early. The stress, the fear, it triggered contractions." "She's barely 5 months. 5 months, 2 weeks at most." "I know. The baby won't survive. Might not anyway. And if we don't stop the bleeding, Anna won't either." Grace and Ben stood in the doorway, eyes wide with terror. Caleb gathered them, held them close. "It's going to be okay." "Is Mama dying?" Grace asked. "No. Doc Harrison's the best doctor in the territory. He'll save her." But Harrison's face told a different story. This was bad. Worse than bad. Anna was bleeding out, the baby coming too early, everything going wrong at once. Anna screamed again, a sound of pure agony. Then sudden quiet. The kind of quiet that made Caleb's blood run cold. "Doc," he called. Harrison didn't answer, working frantically. Caleb moved closer, saw the blood. So much blood, more than should be possible. "Caleb," Anna's voice weak, thready. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." "Save your strength." "No. Listen." She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "The baby. If it's a girl, name her Sarah, after your wife. She'd want that. You're going to name her yourself. Caleb, please. Promise me. And Grace and Ben. You'll keep them. Raise them. Don't let Pike take them." "Anna, stop. You're not dying." "Promise me." "I promise. But you're going to be fine. We're all going to be fine." Harrison pulled something from Anna, small and bloody. The baby. A girl just as Anna had predicted. But silent. Too small. Born at 22 weeks. Far too early. No infant this premature should survive, Harrison knew. But he had to try. Not moving. "No," Anna whispered. "No, please." Harrison worked on the infant, clearing airways, rubbing vigorously. Still nothing. The baby was dead. Born too early, too small, no chance. Anna sobbed a sound that broke Caleb's heart. "My baby. My Sarah." Then, impossibly, a cry. Weak, thin, but unmistakable. The baby was breathing. Harrison looked shocked. "I'll be damned. She's alive." He wrapped the infant in blankets, placed her on Anna's chest. The baby was tiny, fragile skin, almost translucent, but alive, breathing, fighting. Anna cradled her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, Sarah. Hello, my little fighter." Caleb knelt beside the bed, looked at his wife and the baby they'd created together through sheer stubborn will. The baby wasn't his blood, was Grey Wolf's daughter conceived in another life. But in that moment, looking at her tiny face, her impossibly small hands, he felt the same fierce protective love he'd felt for Molly. "She's beautiful," he said. "She's going to die, isn't she?" Anna asked Harrison. "Babies born this early don't survive." Harrison cleaned his instruments, his face grave. "Most don't. But I've seen 1 or 2 make it. She's breathing on her own. That's something. If we can keep her warm, fed, protected, she might have a chance." "What are her odds?" "Honestly, 1 in 10. Maybe worse." Anna held Sarah tighter, as if she could protect her daughter through sheer force of maternal will. "Then we fight for that 1 chance." The rest of the night passed in a blur. Harrison showed Anna how to feed Sarah tiny amounts of milk every hour, how to keep her warm, wrapped close to skin, how to watch for signs of distress. Grace and Ben crept in, stared at their new sister with wonder and fear. "She's so small," Ben whispered. "She'll grow," Caleb said, hoping it was true. By dawn, Sarah was still breathing, still fighting. Harrison had done all he could, left medicines and instructions, promised to return that evening. Anna slept fitfully, exhausted from labor and blood loss, one arm around Sarah, bundled against her chest. Caleb sat in the chair beside the bed, watching them both, wondering how the hell he was supposed to protect this family from what was coming. Marshal Crawford would arrive in a few hours with the warrant, would see Anna weak from childbirth, the baby hours old and fighting for life. Would he still make the arrest, or would basic human decency delay him? Caleb wanted to believe in human decency, but he'd learned the hard way that the law and decency didn't always align. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. Sheriff Ward stood on the porch alone, hat in hand. Caleb let him in. Ward looked at Anna sleeping with the baby, his expression pained. "I heard," he said quietly. "The whole town heard. Anna went into labor, had the baby early. 6 months. Doc says she might not make it. I'm sorry, truly." Ward twisted his hat. "But Caleb, I'm here to warn you. Crawford's coming, this morning. He knows about the baby," Pike told him. "And Pike's pushing hard for the arrest to happen today, before you can use the baby as a reason to delay. She just gave birth. She's weak. The baby might die." "I know. I tried to reason with Crawford, tried to get him to wait a few days. But Pike's got pressure coming from Santa Fe. Senators, judges, people I can't fight. Crawford's orders are to execute the warrant today, by force if necessary." Caleb looked at his wife, his newborn daughter, his stepchildren sleeping in the other room. Then back at Ward. "I won't let them take her." "Caleb, don't. You fight Crawford, you'll die. And then Anna gets arrested anyway, and the children lose both parents. So what do you suggest I just hand her over?" Ward shifted uncomfortably. "I suggest you think about those children, about what they need. A dead martyr father or a living one who makes the hard choice." It was the same logic Pike had used, the same trap. Surrender or fight, either way, Anna ended up in custody, unless there was a third option. "How long until Crawford gets here?" Caleb asked. 2 hours, maybe less." Ward shifted uncomfortably. "Caleb, I can't stop him this time. The warrant's ironclad. Federal judge signed it. If you resist, he'll use force." "I know." Caleb looked back at the house where Anna slept with Sarah. "But I'm not giving up. Not yet." "Then what will you do?" "Buy time. However I can." Caleb rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had been. "You took a hell of a risk." "Yeah, well, someone's got to stand up to Pike. Might as well be me." Caleb rode back to the ranch, found Anna sitting up in bed, Sarah nursing at her breast. The sight stopped him in his tracks. It was so normal, so domestic, so full of hope despite everything. "You came back," Anna said. "Always." "What did you do?" he explained. About the fake arrest, about Ward's bluff, about the week they'd bought. Anna listened, her face unreadable. "A week," she said when he finished. "That's all we have. It's more than we had this morning." "Is it? What changes in a week? Pike's still powerful. Crawford's still coming. We still have no proof. Maybe the proof will find us. That's not how the world works." "Maybe not, but it's how faith works." Anna laughed, bitter and tired. "Faith, that's what we're reduced to. Faith and stubbornness, it's gotten us this far." She looked down at Sarah, the baby's tiny hand wrapped around her finger. "If I go to prison, if they take me, promise me you'll tell her about me. Tell her I loved her, that I fought for her." "You'll tell her yourself." "Caleb." "No." He sat on the bed, took Anna's free hand. "I didn't marry you to give up. I didn't fall in love with you to watch you surrender. We have a week. We'll use it. And if at the end of that week we still have no proof, then fine. We'll deal with that. But until then, we fight." Anna squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared." "Me too. What if we lose? Then we lose knowing we did everything we could. That's all anyone can ask." Sarah made a small sound, something between a cry and a coo. Both parents looked down at her, this impossibly small person who'd decided to live despite terrible odds. "She's a fighter," Anna said, "like her mother. And her father. Both fathers." They sat together in the quiet, holding each other, holding their daughter, pretending for a moment that the world wasn't trying to tear them apart. The week passed in strange suspended animation. Anna recovered slowly, her body healing from the trauma of early childbirth. Sarah grew stronger each day, defying Doc Harrison's predictions. Grace and Ben adapted to their new sister, taking turns watching her sleep, marveling at her tiny fingers and toes. And Caleb searched for answers that refused to appear. He talked to everyone who'd known Thomas. Interviewed ranch hands, shopkeepers, anyone who might have information. Found fragments, hints, but nothing concrete. Margaret continued her investigation, pushing her contacts, calling in favors. She found more circumstantial evidence, more suspicious coincidences, but nothing that would hold up in court. By the 6th day, they were no closer to proof than when they'd started. The noose was tightening, and everyone knew it. That evening, Caleb sat on the porch watching the sunset, Molly's doll in his hands. He'd failed. Again. Just like he'd failed Sarah and Molly. Just like he seemed destined to fail everyone he loved. "Mind if I join you?" Margaret Hayes stood at the bottom of the porch steps, looking tired but determined. "It's your choice," Caleb said. She sat beside him, saw the doll, smiled sadly. "Molly loved that thing, carried it everywhere." "I know. You still carry it, after 7 years. Keeps her close." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "One of my witnesses broke. Tom Ellis. He went to Crawford this afternoon, confessed everything. Pike threatened him, bribed him, coached his entire testimony. None of it was true." Caleb's heart leaped. "That's it. That's what we need." "There's more," Margaret continued. "With Ellis's confession, Crawford went back through the financial records I gave him last week, cross-referenced the payments, found patterns. He's building a case strong enough to arrest Pike." Caleb took the papers, scanned them quickly. His heart rate kicked up. This was it. This was the proof they needed. "How did you get these?" "Broke into his office, picked the lock on his safe, took them and ran." "Margaret, he could have killed you." "Probably. But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of watching him destroy lives. If these documents can stop him, the risk was worth it." Caleb stood, papers clutched in his hand. "We need to get these to Crawford, tonight." They rode to town together, found the marshal in his hotel room. He answered the door in his shirt sleeves, looking annoyed at the interruption. "This better be important." "It is." Caleb handed him the papers. "Financial records showing Pike paid for false testimony, paid witnesses to lie, paid a judge to sign a fraudulent warrant." Crawford read through them slowly, his expression growing darker with each page. "Where did you get these? Does it matter?" "It matters for admissibility. If they were obtained illegally, I can't use them. They were obtained by a concerned citizen who had reason to believe a crime was being committed," Margaret said smoothly. "That citizen is willing to testify under oath about where she found them and what they prove." Crawford looked at her. "You stole these from Pike." "I recovered stolen evidence of corruption. Slight difference." For a long moment Crawford said nothing. Then he set the papers down, looked Caleb in the eye. "This is enough to question the warrant's validity, enough to open an investigation into Pike's activities, but it's not enough to arrest him. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I need to verify these documents, confirm the payments, get testimony from the witnesses Pike paid. That takes time." "How much time?" "More than the day we have left." Caleb felt hope draining away. They'd found proof, but it wasn't enough. Wasn't fast enough. "So what happens tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow I execute the warrant." But Crawford raised a hand, forestalling Caleb's protest. "I do it my way. Anna comes into custody voluntarily. No force, no violence. She stays in comfortable quarters, not a cell. The baby stays with her. And her case gets moved to federal court in Santa Fe, where Pike's influence is weaker. She still goes to prison. For now. But with this evidence, I can build a case against Pike, can expose the corruption, give Anna a real chance at a fair trial. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't complete defeat either. I need to talk to Anna, Caleb said. Back at the ranch, he laid out everything. The documents, Crawford's offer, the options they had left. Anna listened while nursing Sarah, her face calm, accepting. So I go to Santa Fe, she said when he finished. Leave the children with you. Hope Crawford's investigation moves fast enough to clear me before trial. Yes. And if it doesn't, then I bring the children to visit you every week, and we wait for justice to catch up. Anna looked down at Sarah, stroked her daughter's soft hair. I don't want her to grow up visiting me in prison. She won't. We'll fix this. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll try. Every day. Until it works, or I'm dead. Anna smiled, sad and beautiful. You really mean that? Every word. She stood, handed Sarah to Grace, turned to Caleb. Then I'll go. Tomorrow. I'll surrender to Crawford. But first I want one thing. What? A real wedding night. Tonight. No fear, no running. Just you and me and the choice to be together. Caleb understood. Tomorrow she'd be gone, taken into custody. Tonight might be all they had. He sent the children to sleep in the cabin, built up the fire, laid out blankets on the floor beside the hearth, and when Anna came to him dressed in a simple nightgown, he loved her the way he should have loved her from the beginning, gently, completely, without reservation. Afterwards they lay together watching the fire, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. I love you, she said. However this ends, I want you to know that. I love you, Caleb Stone. I love you too, and this isn't ending. It's just beginning. Always the optimist. Always the fighter. She laughed softly, kissed him one more time. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, pretending the morning would never come. But morning came anyway, as it always does. Marshal Crawford arrived at dawn with Sheriff Ward and 2 deputies, professional, respectful, doing a job he clearly didn't enjoy. Anna dressed carefully, kissed each of her children, held Sarah for a long moment. Then she turned to Caleb, placed the baby in his arms. Take care of them, all of them. I will. And Caleb, remember what I asked you, at the church, the question. I remember. You answered it, last night, with actions, not words. That's enough. That's everything. She kissed him deep and sweet. Then she walked out to the horses, let Crawford help her mount, rode away without looking back. Caleb stood on the porch holding Sarah, Grace, and Ben at his side, watching until the dust settled, and she was gone. Is Mama coming back? Ben asked. Yes, Caleb said, making a promise he'd die trying to keep. She's coming back. 2 weeks passed. Crawford's investigation moved forward slowly but steadily. He interviewed Pike's witnesses, found contradictions in their stories, examined the financial records, traced the payments, built a case that grew stronger by the day. Anna remained in Santa Fe in a private room rather than a cell, Sarah with her. Crawford sent regular updates. She was healthy. The baby was thriving. The case was progressing. But progress wasn't fast enough. The trial date approached, and without concrete proof of Pike's guilt, Anna would still face a jury poisoned by years of Pike's propaganda. Then 3 days before the trial, everything changed. One of Pike's witnesses broke. A ranch hand named Tom Ellis, who'd been paid to testify about seeing Anna at the raid. He went to Crawford, confessed everything. How Pike had threatened him, bribed him, coached his testimony. How none of it was true. How he couldn't live with the lie anymore. Crawford arrested Pike that afternoon on charges of witness tampering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Margaret's documents, combined with Ellis's testimony, were enough to hold him pending investigation. The warrant for Anna's arrest was voided. The charges dropped. She was released immediately. Caleb got the news by telegram. Rode to Santa Fe that same day, found Anna in the boarding house where Crawford had arranged for her to stay. She answered the door with Sarah in her arms, looking tired but free. They didn't speak, just held each other while their daughter squirmed between them, too young to understand, but sensing the joy. "It's over," Anna whispered. "It's really over. It's over." They rode home together. Arrived at the ranch as the sun set. Grace and Ben ran out to meet them, threw themselves at their mother, crying and laughing and talking over each other. That night they ate dinner as a family. Caleb, Anna, Grace, Ben, and tiny Sarah sleeping in a basket by the fire. Just a family. Normal. Safe. After the children were in bed, Caleb and Anna sat on the porch under the stars. "I never thanked you," Anna said, "for everything, for marrying me, for protecting my children, for fighting when I wanted to give up. You don't need to thank me. I did it because I wanted to. Why? When I first asked you, you said you didn't know if you wanted a wife or just shelter. What changed?" Caleb thought about it. About the question she'd asked him so many times. The question he'd finally answered with actions instead of words. "I wanted both," he said finally. "I wanted to do the right thing to give you shelter from Pike. But I also wanted you, wanted Grace and Ben, wanted to be part of something bigger than my grief. I just didn't know how to say it. And now I know. You asked me at the church if I wanted a wife or just shelter. The answer is I want both. I want you safe, yes, but I also want you. I want to wake up next to you. I want to raise these children together. I want to be your husband in every way that matters, not because I have to, because I want to." Anna smiled that beautiful smile that transformed her whole face. "That's all I ever needed to hear. I love you, Anna Stone. I love you too, Caleb Stone." They sat together in the darkness, holding hands, watching the stars. Somewhere in the house, Sarah cried softly, a sound that meant she needed feeding. Anna stood, moved to go inside, paused. "You still carry Molly's doll," she said, noticing it on the table beside him. "I do. Does it help, keeping her close like that?" Caleb picked up the doll, held it one more time. Then he stood, walked into the house, went to Grace's room. The girl was asleep, blonde hair spread across the pillow, looking so much like Molly it made his heart ache. He tucked the doll into Grace's arms, kissed her forehead, and walked away. Anna met him in the hallway, understanding in her eyes. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Molly's gone. But Grace is here, and she needs that doll more than I do." They went to bed together, husband and wife, parents to 3 beautiful children who'd given them both a reason to live again. The prairie wind whispered through the sagebrush outside, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in 7 years, Caleb Stone looked forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. He'd found his answer, not in words or logic, but in the simple act of choosing love over fear, choosing family over isolation, choosing to live instead of just survive. The question had been answered, not with certainty or guarantees, but with the quiet courage of someone willing to try again despite the risk. Did he want a wife or just shelter? He wanted both. And in Anna, in Grace, in Ben, in tiny Sarah he'd found them. The hardest hearts he'd learned aren't softened by grand gestures or passionate declarations. They're softened by the quiet accumulation of days lived together, by children's laughter and shared meals and the simple act of choosing over and over to stay. And Caleb Stone, the man who'd spent 7 years as a ghost, chose to stay, chose to love, chose to live. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.